and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So our topic today addresses living in an age of materialism and how it can be sometimes challenging to let go of things that may not serve our spiritual growth. I've chosen some readings and questions which can hopefully lead to a rich and inspiring discussion. So are there things that we can let go of to help us readjust the balance for God and grow more spiritually? I'll start with some readings that I've chosen from the Message and the New International Version of the Bible. 1 Corinthians. I send this letter to you in God's church at Corinth, Christians cleaned up by Jesus and set apart for a God-filled life. I include in my greeting all who call out to Jesus wherever they live. He's their master as well as ours. May all the gifts and benefits that come from God our Father and the Master Jesus Christ be yours. Every time I think of you, and I think of you often, I thank God for your lives of free and open access to God given by Jesus. There's no end to what has happened in you. It's beyond speech, beyond knowledge. The evidence of Christ has been clearly verified in your lives. Luke. One day, when large groups of people were walking along with him, Jesus turned and told them, anyone who comes to me but refuses to let go of father, mother, spouse, children, brothers, sisters, yes, even one's own self, can't be my disciple. Anyone who won't shoulder his own cross and follow behind me can't be my disciple. Is there anyone here who, planning to build a new house, doesn't first sit down and figure the cost so you'll know if you can complete it? If you only get the foundation laid and then run out of money, you're going to look pretty foolish. Everyone passing by will poke fun at you. He started something he couldn't finish. Simply put, if you're not willing to take what is dearest to you, whether plans or people, and kiss it goodbye, you can't be my disciple. Salt is excellent, but if the salt goes flat, it's useless, good for nothing. Are you listening to this? Really listening? And from Science and Health. Does thou love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind? This command includes much, even the surrender of all merely material sensation, affection, and worship. This is the El Dorado of Christianity. It involves the science of life and recognizes only the divine control of spirit, in which soul is our master, and material sense and human will have no place. Are you willing to leave all for Christ, for truth, and so be counted among sinners? Consistent prayer is the desire to do right. Prayer means that we desire to walk and will walk in the light so far as we receive it, even though with bleeding footsteps and that waiting patiently on the Lord, we will leave our real desires to be rewarded by Him. Spiritual sense is a conscious, constant capacity to understand God. We must resolve to take up the cross and go forth with honest hearts to work and watch for wisdom, truth, and love. Christians rejoice in secret beauty and bounty hidden from the world, but known to God. Self-forgetfulness, purity, and affection are constant prayers. Practice not profession, understanding not belief. Gain the ear and right hand of omnipotence, and they assuredly call down infinite blessings. Without a fitness for holiness, we cannot receive holiness. From my very childhood, I was impelled by a hunger and thirst after divine things, a desire for something higher and better than matter, and apart from it, to seek diligently for the knowledge of God as the one great and ever-present relief from human woe. Right adjusts the balance sooner or later. So that starts us off for some questions for discussion, and feel free to say whatever inspires you today. You don't have to just address my questions. So the first question is, what do we need to sacrifice in order to follow Christ Jesus' example? The second question, how do we become spiritually fit? And the third, how do we keep our salt salty? What does Jesus mean by this analogy? So maybe I'll go ahead and put these in the chat as well.
Thank you for your readings and the topic. It's great. I feel like we're faced with that often or daily, the idea of letting go of things in order to be more spiritual. I mean, we kind of do it every day. I'm going to address the second question just because it seems easy. How do you become more fit? I think, well, anything regarding fitness takes practice. You know, you just have to put it into practice often. So just like if you want to be a star athlete, you got to work out every day. If you want to be really spiritually prepared, you got to do it every day. You wake up, you're thinking about God and your spiritual understanding of God before your feet hit the floor every day, and start the day with prayer and the lesson or whatever, way you want to do it. I feel like that's the best way to be fit anyway, in any way. Letting go is a little harder, especially regarding maybe the idea of aging and sort of leaving behind a sense of beauty in matter. Like I was more beautiful when I was young, for example, or I was more something at a certain time in my life. That can be challenging, but when we do let it go, it's very freeing. I read a journal article years ago about being ageless mortals, or ageless and immortal. And it was really just really freeing, this feeling that we aren't aging into a certain decrepit, version of ourselves that will be a shadow of our former selves that's so limited. So I was just grateful for that idea too. Thanks.
I'll share the question number one. It says, what do you need to sacrifice in order to follow Christ Jesus' example? My first thought is everybody will have a different answer. Whatever's keeping me from, whatever's trying to sidetrack me in my thoughts. If it's something I know I can let go of, then I just need to let that go, so I can focus on God. For an example, I was overwhelmed. I shouldn't say overwhelmed. I continually kept thinking about if I should cut my hair. I mean, this might not be a good example, but and literally it was my focus a lot, like every day. And yesterday I saw what the topic was, and I think, oh, I have my hair, my overthinking of something material. This is something I totally can let go of. So I just went and got some, got it cut. And it was just like, it was just free. And it was just like, okay, that was, and I can kind of use that probably as an analogy of other things in my life. Just whatever I need to let go of, just let it go. It's fine. And now I can, my thinking can be focused on where it needs to be. So thank you.
I'll just tag onto that because it reminded me right now of the line, loss is gain. Just that we can't actually lose anything. We can only lose a material sense of things, but we can gain spiritual sense. So, letting go of things is just leaving room for spiritual growth, but we can't lose anything good. And your hair example is great. There's no example that's little or big or better or worse. It's like all good.
I think my husband wants to talk. Sorry, I have him up to the side.
So I was thinking about your third question about what does salt have to do with it? And I remember thinking about salt as a preservative. And then salt also gives flavor. And so when thinking about that, what does salt add? Salt's at preservation, but also flavoring. And in The Chosen, they actually spoke about that when they did the Sermon on the Mount. And speaking about the significance of salt. So anyway, there you go.
So how do you keep it salty though, David?
How do you keep it salty? Well, so I get into the preservation part of it by your first question, by the study. If we are continually studying and listening, then we are receptive to what God is saying to us. And also, we are practicing our at-one-ment with God, therefore having that preservation. And that we've never fallen out of favor with God. We've never fallen away from God. We are right there with God as the expressions of love and life and spirit and protection. So by practicing our spiritual practice, we are adding salt to our experience, but also just by listening and experiencing. We all are individual. And so by demonstrating our own individuality, we are also giving that flavoring to life. We are flavoring the experience of those who are interacting with us. So is that enough or? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I liked your idea, what you mentioned. I wrote myself a note and then I didn't exactly remember what you said, but it opened the idea for me of saying no to something allows me to say yes, allows for space to say yes for something that really matters. And I chose this topic because I'm working on it in my own life. And I think about my resources that I own, that I have, my time, my energy, my money, my thought, my words, everything. But I really try to shift to be spiritually fit. I really try to shift my energy, my money, my inbox on my email to be full of Christian Science things, remove what's unnecessary or distracting, And so I love, I have James Early's thing that comes every time he sends out a new podcast, and I have the Daily Lift, and I have all the stuff that the Publishing Society sends out. And I don't know, it's a silly little way that I think about adding, really showing that for myself that I'm working on readjusting balance in my life and becoming spiritually fit, like Bonnie was talking about. So thanks everybody so far for your ideas. I'm taking notes.
Well,
And-
I Was someone else
Go ahead.
wanting to say something?
Go ahead, and then I'll go.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about the questions that were on the invitation. And I was thinking, I've been thinking about it for years and trying to live up to it, to get rid of both material and mental clutter. Because that really, why bring along so much baggage? You're much freer to move and be fit. You're much fitter if you get rid of mental baggage. And mental baggage is, it can be a lot of things. I work in the reading room, and one of the things that is in the manual is that we should not allow gossip in the reading room. And I think of gossip as talking about other people's material or human lives. Really, that doesn't concern us at all. And so getting rid of any thought about someone else's life, unless it's positive thinking, I mean positive, constructive thinking about someone else, especially if they've asked for some spiritual inspiration or something. So I'm working really hard now to see each day, what have I been able to give to someone else rather than just taking? What am I doing to fulfill my duty to God, to show him how much I love him? What am I doing for my leader to show how grateful I am for her discovery and the fact that I have had it all my life to use and practice? And what am I doing for mankind? And I guess the beginning of all those is the daily prayer, the amount of it's not the amount of time, it's the time spent wisely at the beginning of the day, praying to listen to God, to live up to the standards that Mary Baker Eddy gives us following Christ, and how I can best give to mankind each day. And then at the end of the day, making a note of how successful I've been in the day, keeping that going.
And so kind of going along with what you're saying, Joy, but back to what you said, Christy, too, about filling your inbox with more spiritual ideas. I've kind of, it brings to mind the quote, and you guys can finish it for me, I'm sure, keep your thoughts so filled with, however
Truth
that
and
one
love.
goes. Thank
Truth
you.
and love.
Yeah.
That
And
sin,
so,
disease, and death cannot enter.
thank you. Right. So that's kind of, without maybe being, well, I guess I have been mindful of it. So the same thing, I try to have lots of good things coming into my inbox, but also on Facebook and my notifications, that they're more along the lines of Christian Science than some of the other goofy things that can come across. And reading and television and that kind of thing, and having it more be spiritual rather than material and worldly, so to speak. So I appreciate that thought. Those are things that are easier and easier to give up, the worldly material things, in terms of entertainment and such.
Yeah, I love that idea. And Joy, what you were talking about, what do you do every day to show God that you love God, and to our leader, Mary Baker Eddy, and to mankind, reminds me of the verse, so freely I have received, freely give. And I'll never forget, after doing my class instruction, probably the best 14 days of my entire life, and then flying home and receiving something from my teacher, and he sent us a bunch of things, and then that verse, and how easy it felt that I could go out and live what I just learned, because it was such a gift. What a beautiful gift that class instruction is. Does anyone else have anything to say about those readings or the first few questions? I can continue.
I've got plenty more to say, but carry on.
Okay. Okay. All right. From the Bible, Matthew. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence. And from Science and Health. During the Central Ages, absolute Christian science may not be achieved prior to the change called death, for we have not the power to demonstrate what we do not understand. But the human self must be evangelized. This task God demands us to accept lovingly today, and to abandon so fast as practical the material, and to work out the spiritual, which determines the outward and actual. If you venture upon the quiet surface of error and are in sympathy with error, what is there to disturb the waters? What is there to strip off error's disguise? If you launch your bark upon the ever agitated but helpful waters of truth, you will encounter storms. Your good will be evil spoken of. This is the cross. Take it up and bear it, for through it you win and wear the crown. Pilgrim on earth, thy home is heaven. Stranger, thou art the guest of God. Christian Science is not an exception to the general rule that there is no excellence without labor in a direct line. One cannot scatter his fire and at the same time hit the mark. To pursue other vocations and advance rapidly in the demonstration of this science is not possible. We must receive the divine principle in the understanding and live it in daily life. And unless we do so, we can no more demonstrate science than we can teach and illustrate geometry by calling a curve a straight line or a straight line a sphere. Here's another couple questions for discussion. The first one, in what ways do we take up the cross, and how has it been helpful to our healing demonstrations? And the second, how do we grow spiritually with so many things competing for our attention? And feel free to talk about whatever speaks to you. If you don't address these questions, that's totally fine.
Can you also post those in the chat?
I will. I'll do that right now. Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah, for me, the one about with so many things competing, how do we grow spiritually? So many things competing for our attention hits home a lot. And it's challenging sometimes, especially with, I feel like we live in an age, especially in the last 20 years, it's really ramped up trying to compete for our attention, whether it's social media with infinite feeds that are designed to keep you there, or it's advertising, or it's Netflix, or whatever it is, the news. Like the news is structured to keep you there through shock and awe, with obviously notable exceptions like the Monitor. So that's one that I definitely have been working through. And I really liked your metaphor. Well, it's not a metaphor, but the inbox, keeping that kind of focused on what you put in front of you, because that whatever we surround ourselves with is where we kind of end up. Like if if somebody watches horror movies all the time, you're going to develop more fear and whatever that kind of encompasses. And likewise, if you surround yourself with more spiritual learning and striving, you end up in that direction, as a general rule. So like you, I'm always trying to improve on, I guess I could say, my spiritual diet, or just as Mrs. Eddy says, to stand porter at the door of thought and only let in the things that you want realized in your experience or your bodily results. But I find this to be a really great topic. It's something that I've thought of a lot as I've progressed in life, because there's a lot of times in the Bible where Jesus talks about whether it's the parable of the sower, and he talks about that some seeds end up in the thorns where they're choked out by the cares of the world. And I believe it seems like we live in an age of materialism where there's so much emphasis put on as you mentioned earlier, like what we look like, or what our status is, or whatever the infinite et ceteras are, which is obviously money driven with people that want to sell things. But it's important to not get caught up in that, and to be mindful of I guess where we're putting our time, our energy. It was interesting growing up, going from a place where I was actually homeless for a time, and kind of went and put myself through college, and now own a company and I'm doing well. But there's also in the Bible where Jesus talks about, this rich man comes to him and says, well, what can I do to inherit eternal life? And he basically tells him, go and sell everything that you have and give it to the poor and come and follow me. And we see that, when he comes to Simon and Andrew, he tells them to just leave their nets, leave things, which you kind of brought out in your readings, and come and follow me. And so it's a legitimate thing that, for me, we have to consider, where are we heading? What direction, what trajectory are we heading in our lives? Because you can't, as they say, you can't take it with you, right? You can't take all these material possessions with you. So what are you really investing in? Jesus talks about, invest, put your things where, thieves can't steal, and where moth and rust doesn't, corrupt, but, have your treasure in heaven. So that's one thing that's always, just stuck in the back of my mind. I think it comes down to motives too. Like, could someone have, a lot of money and be doing great things with it? Sure. And I think they could be doing it in a great direction, but you could also have a lot of money and not do, just do very self-focused things. And maybe for me, it wouldn't be a great, way to progress or try to progress spiritually. Because it's like, she says you can't serve both God and, as you mentioned, money, which I thought was a really cool interpretation. Like, you kind of have to pick a trajectory. So yeah, for me, that's something that's always kind of, in maybe the forefront of my thought of, is this something that's going to move me closer to God? Is this something that's going to make, bring about my better qualities, help me serve others? And if it's not, and I can consciously realize that, and sometimes you get down the rabbit hole a little bit before you're like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't the right direction. You kind of have to reassess and re-aim. But yeah, it's a really great topic, just to be conscious of what we're letting go of. And as was mentioned, they're not things that serve us or move us higher. The things that we can let go of are just things that would anchor us down, things that don't have any real joy or satisfaction, things, whether we're just investing in stuff from a material pleasure standpoint or investing in our bodies from a preservation of, some physical ideal standpoint or whatever it is, or even status things like expensive cars or expensive homes, like, and to each their own. But for me, like, again, if I can't take it with me, like, to me, I would like to get to, 80, 90 years old and be able to look back and be like, wow, I did some really great things with my time here, rather than be like, wow, I kind of wasted my time here and just, screen sucked and survived and made money and that was it. Like, that to me would be a life wasted. So yeah, it's a really great topic and makes me think a lot more of how I can, on a daily basis, better let go of the things that don't serve me.
Well, I was thinking of some of the things that claim our attention, and how they can creep in because we're surrounded by them. I mean, idolatry is one of the things that is really punched at us all the time. Like body worship. How many things are throwing the body at us all the time, every day? It's not just descriptions of disease or drugs that are supposed to deal with the problem they've caused or the side effects they've caused, other drugs. It's the body image, the what's acceptable for a way to look to other people. It's the fashions and all the accessories and everything. I mean, the malls are just full of stuff they're throwing at you. Some of it's nice, but most of it's really totally unnecessary to live a happy life. And I guess I was fortunate because I grew up with almost nothing, and I didn't ever really have a develop a taste for things that I couldn't have. But I do see, even so, how difficult it is for especially younger people growing up, when all their contemporaries are feeling a need. They feel like they'll be looked down on if they don't have it. How do you deal with that for children, for young people? So those are some of the things. And then the diets. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of diets there must be around. And well, even the emphasis on fitness. Really, if your thinking is agile, you will have a normally active life, which should be sufficient to keep you in a healthy state. So I guess those are some of the thoughts, and starting the day and really insisting that God is governing my day and my nights, and that he orders my life harmoniously and coordinates all the time doing with every one of his children that I come in contact with, I think is a very helpful way not to get distracted. But it does take a lot of practice to keep on that straight line and keep listening to God to guide me and coordinate my activities and show me what he wants me to do each day. If I do that, then I can't be distracted so easily.
Regarding your first question, how do we take up the cross? I think it's really listening to all of the stories in the Bible of Jesus and what he's asking of us, which is a lot, leave all for Christ. But like you read, when we launch our bark upon the healthful but ever agitated waters of truth, you will encounter storms. So it is work. I mean, that's taking up the cross is really basically every day, every moment, trying to correct our thoughts and heal the world, and not letting error creep in and take root. Like today, I kind of went down a little, I just read an article about that shooting yesterday, and I was really sad. And so I turned off my phone and I just prayed, because, it'd be easy. I think it's harder to always do what we do, which is correct our thought constantly. Sometimes it would be easy to, like, Joy, what you're saying, gossip, or go down that path of complaining about our lives, and, fall into the thought that just is pervasive of kind of everything's hard, the world is doomed. It's kind of easy to think that way, because then you're just, you're among the masses, you crawl into a ball and you just feel safe in your fear or whatever. But when we launch our bark upon the truthful waters, healthful, agitated, whatever, you're going to encounter storms. Your good will be evil spoken of. It's work, but it's so satisfying. And we know that it's working and healing. Last week, the lesson, Jesus at the pool of Bethesda, healing the man who's been sitting there for 38 years. I've heard that story so many times, but for some reason, it really stuck out to me this time. Jesus says, "Wilt thou be made whole?" And the guy goes, "Well, I didn't have anyone to put me in the water. Every time someone stepped down before me." And Jesus didn't ask that. He didn't say, "Why didn't you get in the pool? Why did you never crawl down there?" That's not what he asked at all. He said, "Wilt thou be made whole?" And so we don't have to wrestle around with error. Well, gosh, if I do this or that, or get in the pool or don't get in the pool or whatever, will I be made whole? It's just a choice every day we wake up and make the world whole, make our thoughts whole. So anyway, I think that's the cross. It's work. It takes work. It takes daily work, but it's obviously worth it. It's just it's not easy necessarily, but it's certainly satisfying.
One thing I like about that story about the man at the pool of Bethesda that struck me one time, long time ago when I was reading it, wilt thou be made whole? Because we are made whole. He's asking him, do you want to be what you are? I don't know if I've expressed that clearly, but do you want to be who you really are, whole? And I also thought about, why did Jesus pick him? There were so many people there at the pool of Bethesda. And he left really quickly after he healed that one man. So what was it in that man's thought that made Jesus pick him out from the crowd? I think in a way that man must have been praying to God. And so he was receptive to the Christ. And yeah, taking up the cross, that is our daily claiming of what's already God's creation. There really is nothing to be healed. The work is not being healed, it's seeing that we are whole. So I'm glad you brought that story up. It isn't easy to always claim that, but it is what heals, and heals quickly, knowing that it just cannot exist in God's kingdom. Nothing can exist in God's kingdom except what God made.
Something kind of fun is that my daughter was standing at the pool of Bethesda last week. She was in Israel, and it was a really harmonious trip. She goes to Principia, the boarding school for Christian Scientists, and she was there, and they had the best time, and it was so harmonious, every aspect of it, until the very last day. And there was a prayer group happening through the whole thing, an email chain with, you know, parents, guardians, friends, whoever wanted to be prayerfully supportive of the group. And so the last day, it was time to leave Tel Aviv and fly to Jordan and then back to Chicago. And the Bible teacher emailed all of us, and he said, looks like error needs some attention here. We're all standing aghast. There seems to be, you know, we're all sad, tired, passports lost, luggage lost. Something's wrong with everybody right now. And so get to work, you know, and boy, did they, and me included, but we all just, it was like all hands on deck. This was Friday night here in the States. And it was like, every time I checked my phone, there was the most healing, deeply metaphysical ideas coming at us, and not just like surfacey, I'll be thinking about you kind of things, but like really deep, really thoughtful. And I was like, we are not just healing this group, we are healing the world right now, you know? And to me, it felt like we 28 people or whatever were infinity. It was like there was no limit to what those healing thoughts were doing for the world. And sure enough, they all got back to Chicago and then St. Louis safely. But, you know, again, we could just be surfacey and think good thoughts, or we can really dig in. And again, that's that taking up the cross. And it was so exciting to see that work done, and just know how much blessing was accomplished for everyone and the world. I know it. I know those thoughts and prayers and healing ideas went out everywhere.
Wonderful healing, Bonnie. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to, Bonnie, you were talking about complaining, and it made me think of there's a hymn, and I looked it up, so I want to make sure I got it right. I think it's hymn 249, and it says, talks about how complaint is poverty. And I just love that idea. I work with kids, so it's just a really helpful thought. But it says, our gratitude is riches, complaint is poverty. Our trials bloom in blessings, they test our constancy. And when I think about why is complaint poverty? we're basically, or I could be basically wasting my time on and my energy on something that's not real if I'm complaining, right? Because that means there's something bad going on. And, I'm in the material world. I'm not thinking about the kingdom of heaven. Which world am I residing in? So I'm sure there's a lot more if I studied that a little bit. Why is complaint poverty? But I really think that idea is helpful. And I love the idea, Joy, of my thinking being agile. Like when I think about if I want to be fit, I love that idea, and flexible and agile. And that's a really good thought.
I feel
God's
like
ideas run and disport themselves. They climb the heights of mind. Go ahead, Joel. Sorry.
I was gonna say, if gratitude is riches and complaint is poverty, I feel like gratitude is acknowledging everything that's around you, no matter, how small. And obviously we're not talking about, material possessions, but all the gifts that we've been given of, being the children of God, every one of us, and having an infinite father, mother, creator that's loves us and holds us and guides us and guards us in every moment. And so for me, complaint is not acknowledging, it's seeing lack, it's seeing that we don't have, it's choosing to see, a limited viewpoint of those things not being there. Whereas gratitude, acknowledges the good. So yeah, for me, there's no benefit to complaint. The faster I can switch my mindset out of that, the better. And the antidote is gratitude.
That's so important. I love that. I never really thought about that exactly, but that's totally true. It reminds me of a friend of ours, I'm sure you know her too, from college, who would say, worry is ingratitude to God in the future. It's like saying, I'm worried about something because God isn't going to help me then, or you just can't see that God's helping you in the future. You see it now. Well, everything's fine now, but something's might go wrong or will, or what if all the ducks aren't lined up in a row in the future? It's like saying, we don't think of it really like worry. Well, what if, it's like, just ingratitude to God in the future. That gratitude being the antidote. That's great though.
I have a few more readings. We can continue. And if you have something to say about those questions that we've already talked about, feel free to bring those up as well. All right. So I chose a couple ideas regarding finding balance and taking up the cross. So from Science and Health, emerge gently from matter into spirit. Think not to thwart the spiritual ultimate of all things, but come naturally into spirit through better health and morals, and as the result of spiritual growth. And from Recapitulation, for precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little, from Isaiah. And this scientific sense of being, forsaking matter for spirit, by no means suggests man's absorption into deity and the loss of his identity, but confers upon man enlarged individuality, a wider sphere of thought and action, a more expansive love, a higher and more permanent peace. Spirit God is heard when the senses are silent. We are all capable of more than we do. When the human element in him struggled with the divine, our great teacher said, "Not my will, but thine be done." That is, let not the flesh, but the spirit be represented in me. This is the new understanding of spiritual love. It gives all for Christ, or truth. It blesses its enemies, heals the sick, casts out error, raises the dead from trespasses and sins, and preaches the gospel to the poor, the meek in heart. And from Colossians, servants, do what you're told by your earthly masters. And don't just do the minimum that will get you by. Do your best. Work from the heart for your real master, for God, confident that you'll get paid in full when you come into your inheritance. And from miscellaneous writings, meekness, moderating human desire, inspires wisdom and procures divine power. Human lives are yet uncarved in the rough marble, encumbered with crude, rude fragments, and awaiting the hammering, chiseling, and transfiguration from his hand. So the last couple questions. Do we have to leave everything for Christ? What does this look like in our lives? And what are some ways we can balance family, work responsibilities, and activities while deepening our spiritual understanding? We've talked about that one a bit, but I'll go ahead and post these both in the chat as well. Feel free to share anything else that comes to mind too. Doesn't have to be those questions.
I remember in regards to your first question, do we have to leave everything for Christ? Because I think about that from time to time, and remember, I have to tell you, I was brought up in Christian Science as a child, and then left for a long time, and only recently have come back. And a friend said, I was saying something in regards to medical treatment as opposed to Christian Science, and she said, "Oh, but Christian Science are very practical," and that something I've thought about off and on, and so we, you know, literally, do we have to leave everything for Christ? In this current experience, I don't see how that's practical. But I guess it has to be, again, not material but spiritual, and so finding that balance is back to the question, really. Actually, I don't think I know the answer to that, but it's certainly good, and there have been a lot of good thoughts to think about in regards to that today.
I think what we have to leave, and we do have to leave it, is the material sense and erroneous sense. That would be like judging someone who went to the doctor. That would be something I need to leave. If we lead with love, like, I don't think it would be responsible for me to leave everything in my life, quit my jobs, and leave my family to go sit on a mountain and pray for the rest of my life. That's not very practical nor loving. So I think when we lead with love and dismiss all error, hate, jealousy, we're constantly standing at the door of thought, just guarding our thought from, judgment and gossip, all these things. That's leaving all for Christ. Well, we can live here in this phase of our existence in just the most loving way we can. But yeah, leaving everything, saying, I have to do this thing, I have to pray instead of go to the doctor, or else what, I'm going to be something. That's not the right kind of thinking. So I do think it's like leading with love and just leaving that erroneous sense.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'll often have like a black or white, like all or nothing approach sometimes, where I feel like maybe I should be like a monk in terms of my possessions. Maybe I should be like, praying you know, I guess if Jesus was the example for me, I see that he didn't take much with him. He told, you know, when he sent his disciples out, he didn't tell them to take much with them. He did spend a lot of his time praying and teaching and healing. So I guess for me, the more that I can kind of let go of the material junk, the stuff that doesn't really serve me, the distractions, all of it, and move more in that direction. Like you said, there's no like hard and fast rule for it. And often, as you brought out, you know, more of the real hard, the challenging things, it's easy sometimes to let go of a material possession. It's sometimes much harder to let go of something like judgment or anger, or, you know, whatever that is, whatever, you know, the challenges, you know, that you're dealing with or that I'm dealing with. Those can be the things that sometimes seem like it can take a lifetime to get rid of. But obviously the sooner we let go, as you mentioned, of whatever it is that doesn't serve us, maybe it is material things, maybe it is, you know, things that we hold on to emotionally or judgments or whatever. But I love the, you know, emerge gently from matter to spirit. So hopefully, you know, in my day-to-day life, I'm gradually letting go of more of that stuff and gradually moving closer and closer and praying more and more and learning and moving in that direction. Because, you know, it's brought out too, that we, you know, we walk in the direction towards which we look, and where our treasure is, there will our heart be also. So it's always important to do a little reality check with that. Like, what is the direction I'm looking in? You know, where am I putting my heart and my treasure?
I was thinking about the article in Miscellaneous Writings. It's a very short one. It's not even a whole page, titled Improve Your Time. And the first sentence says, success in life depends upon persistent effort, upon the improvement of moments, more than upon any other one thing. And then she goes on to talk about how to improve moments and how not to waste them. And then she, in the second to last paragraph, all successful individuals have become such by hard work, by improving moments before they pass into hours, and hours that other people may occupy in the pursuit of pleasure. But the thing is that the more we let go of the wrong kind of thinking, the happier we are. I mean, and the more successful we are, the more progress we make. We're really not giving up anything good, as you said, Joel. We're increasing our store of what's good and filling ourselves up with that. And I think part of the cross is being able to stand up to the incomprehension of other people, to the way of life that we've chosen to follow. And again, the more we love, the easier it becomes to carry that cross.
Well, it's just about over 5, so I think we'll wrap it up. But this was such a fruitful healing gathering. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Christy, for your readings and the topic. And we can continue the conversation in the Facebook group if that feels right, and share any ideas in there that will bless the world. So thank you all, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
Bonnie. Thanks, Joel.
A great
Thanks,
week.
everyone.
Good job, everyone.